Welcome to Conspiracy Corner Podcast. This is Abe, your host. How's everyone doing? Hope everyone's well. I just got off work. Got off a little early. It's 5 a.m. December 6th or 15th now, 2020. Um, yeah, it was. Today was supposed to be my day off, but I went in and worked anyways, trying to make a little extra money for Christmas. There's no way, I'm doing the math in my head. There's no way that I'm gonna have enough money to get Sammy what I want, but um, most likely, I mean, I'm obviously still gonna get her something, but I'll get her something smaller, and maybe Valentine's Day is right around the corner, so I'll hopefully by then have enough money saved up, and I can get her what she wanted for Christmas for Valentine's Day. So we shall see. As long as nothing bad happens, knock on wood. You never know. Um, but yeah, that's about it. That's all I've been doing is podcasting, eating, sleeping, working. That's about it. That's my life. um, Today we're going to be covering a Civil War ghost. Um, I don't know. I was listening to a podcast the other night, and it was last podcast on the left, and they did an episode on Civil War ghost. And honestly, like the section that I've been using of the book that I use, like the little short ghost stories out of, is Haunted Houses. It's written by Nancy Roberts, and it's all true ghost stories. Um, but I don't know. For some reasons, the Civil War, I mean, I get it. I understand why, where it was such a bloody, horrible war, but that's like one of the most famous ghost stories that you hear. It's almost, I'd say almost like 40% of ghost stories are usually like, at least in America, well, less than that, about 30. About 30% of ghost stories in America are usually Civil War related. Especially like Gettysburg and stuff like that. But this one is not in Gettysburg. It's in Franklin, Tennessee, the Carnton Plantation, which, as long as there's directions, and it looks like, yeah, there might be directions in the back for it. Usually with this author, anytime she does a ghost story, she'll tell you the actual location of where to find it, which I think is cool because a lot of ghost hunters, they're like, "Oh, don't go out and look for it yourself. We're professionals." And it's like, "What'd you do? Go to college for ghost hunting? Like, get over yourself, dude. You're the only thing that makes you a professional ghost hunter is that either you might be a truly honest professional ghost hunter and have been doing it for years. I would say that makes you a veteran ghost hunter, or you just got lucky and got a Sci-Fi Channel episodes on. Like you got a deal to where you could be rich off of it. That, I mean, let's be straight up. But Nancy Roberts, man, she's cool. She tells you exactly where to find it, the exact address. It's pretty dope. So we'll go ahead and get into our Civil War ghost story. "There will never be another Carnton House," his friend had said. "Never a place that's seen such tragedy and grief." Perhaps that was the reason Paul Levitt was determined to go up there, up the curving drive, set far back from the road. The house stood alone in a grove of maple trees, its darkened windows staring out from between tall white columns. There was something lonely and mysterious about it. November 30th had been one of those timeless autumn days, but now it was late afternoon, with darkness falling fast. As Paul drove up to the house in his black Ferrari, he realized that he had product placement Ferrari. He realized that he had arrived too late. It was just after 5, and the tour guides would already have left. Well, it didn't matter. He would walk about the grounds. All was quiet. He and this house were alone in another world. The only sound was the faint crunching of his footsteps on the gravel drive. Man, when I start making enough money, I'm going to get a soundboard over here. That's something I need. Well, first I need a second. I need a splicer. We have 2 microphones, and we still haven't had the money to get like a splicer. So I don't know. We're getting there slowly. This is a poor man's podcast, but I think that would be cool, like a soundboard to where I can add sound effects. Uh, we'll get there. It was a time to think and absorb the unfathomable atmosphere of this place that his friend John Carter had described. Underfoot, a profusion of leaves lay like a golden treasure spread out by some profligate Midas. It seemed also wrong to tread upon such beauty. Bending down, Paul picked up one perfect, 5-pointed yellow maple leaf, then another. But on the second leaf were splotches of crimson, bright as blood. It reminded him of how many men had suffered and died here. Carnton House's, What was it, his great-grandmother in Ohio once said? Something like, "Your great-granddaddy fought in a terrible battle at a place called Franklin." He was walking over the same ground where his ancestor had fought. Wasn't it a strange coincidence that today was the anniversary of that struggle? It had lasted just 5 hours, but what a bloody, disastrous battle it had been. Paul walked without considering the time, for he was in no hurry to return to the motel. He found the pressures of his work beginning to leave him. Almost automatically, his feet followed a path that led from the house across the fields. Where was he going? Did it matter? Finally, the path brought him around to the back of the house, and near the porch he saw a figure of a man getting on a horse. If the fellow paused, Paul decided he would speak to him. On second thought, he would take the initiative and hail him. "Hello there, nice horse." "Yep. Had my own horse shot from under me, but I suppose it doesn't matter. Whether you ride or whether you go on foot, you are still at their mercy tonight." This was strange talk. Paul wasn't frightened, but he did find himself tingling slightly. The man spoke again. "If you're coming with me, you'd better find a pistol or a carbine. Otherwise you won't last long out there. But not many of us will live through tonight, anyway." What was he talking about? Thought Paul, now close enough to see the man fairly well. He had a mustache, a short beard, and eyes that bored straight through you. And he sat there in the after-dusk, humming to himself. "We are a band of brothers and native to the soil. And when our rights were threatened, the cry rose near and far, hooray, for the bonny blue flag that bears a single star." Good Lord, thought Paul. They must have been having one of those battle reenactments out there today, and this fellow thinks that I am part of it. From his dress, Paul assumed that the man was an officer. His hat was black cloth with the small gilt buttons on the sides. Strands of gold braid met in the front in a 4-leaf clover without a stem. He wore it with the leather visor pulled down almost as if he were trying to protect his face. At his belt were not only a carbine and a pistol, but a stout sword as well. "What kind of carbine is that you're wearing?" "It's an Enfield 57. Sorry. "What do you have?" "Me? Nothing, man. I just seen them in books. I never shot one, or a pistol either. A sword? I wouldn't know what to do with that." The stranger raised his eyebrows in surprise. You'd better go over to the Carter house then, or into town. There is no place for you tonight. That fool Hood thinks he's as brilliant as Lee, but he's sending my men to be slaughtered." Then he seemed to be talking to someone by his side. The officer's voice rose in anger. "They have 3 lines of works, and they are all completed." If there was a reply, Paul didn't hear it. But he did hear the officer's voice once more, and above the rustle of autumn leaves the words floated back to him strong and clear. "Well, Governor, if we are to die, let us die like men." With that, Paul saw the stranger, who had never bothered to introduce himself, fling his cap furiously into the air and then ride off. From the distance came the shout, "Charge, men, charge! Do you hear me? Do you hear?" And the sound of the voice faded away in the maelstrom of shot and shell, musketry and cannon. Then smoke, or was it mist, seemed to lie all about him. Paul thought he had heard a regiment band strike up the strains of Annie Laurie. A few seconds later came the most awesome sound that Paul had ever heard. A veritable chorus of men's voices shattered the air with the fierce, blood-curdling attack cry that the Union troops had soon learned was the rebel yell. Paul Levitt did what many raw recruits had done when they heard that yell. He began to run. As he ran, his heart pounded. He seemed to be surrounded by the fire of thousands of small arms and the roar of shells. Death pervaded the very atmosphere. He thought he was heading back to his car, but losing his sense of directions, he found himself stumbling about in the graveyard not far from the house. It was a cemetery provided by Carnton shortly after the battle. For a day later, more than 1,700 Confederate men lay dead in fields near this home. Finally, Paul made his way back to his car. What was it his friend Carter had said? That on this ground the rows of dead once stood 6 men deep, so closely they could not fall. Paul slept poorly. For all night long he dreamed that he was in the midst of one furious charge after another. But early the next morning he was out at the house again. If he had been part of some supernatural experience or seen a ghost, as he believed he had, he wanted to understand it. He was fortunate to arrive on a day when Bernice Sieberling was there. Mrs. Sieberling, a delightful, gray-haired lady with a thorough knowledge of the history of Carnton, had long been guiding visitors through the house. I would imagine that a house with this much history has some ghost stories connected with it, Paul said tentatively, as a way to introduce the subject. "Oh my, yes," said Mrs. Sieberling, not reluctant to share stories of some of the spirits. And she began to talk about a former cook at Carnton during Civil War days and the ghost ways of getting attention. "I had been aware of her for quite a while, for I would hear glasses clinking in the kitchen as if someone were washing dishes. Then I began to hear in other areas of the house. One day I had a tour going and it sounded as if rocks were being thrown at the windows and breaking them. Most of the noises were coming from one room. When we reached it, we found a framed picture of the house lying face up on top of the heater, its glass shattered in a million pieces. It was as if though someone had carefully placed it there. One of the men on the tour took out his camera and made a picture of it. For he said, it's impossible for that picture to have fallen in such a way. On another occasion, I was here alone on a cold winter day and kept hearing a noise in a small enclosed porch at the back of the house. So I went to investigate. We keep a box of old glass planes on the shelf there. I found 2 panes of thin old glass unbroken, one lying on each side of the door. The box, of course, was still on the shelf. It's as if though the spirit had a sense of humor and liked to play tricks on me. We had all heard things that but had no idea what was causing them until one day a dissident from Carnton family said, "You know there was a murder in this house, don't you?" It seems that one of the field hands murdered a young girl in the kitchen in the early 1840s or before, probably due to some motive such as jealousy. There was prejudice on that part of the house, servants toward those who did heavy work on the plantation. The girl may have rejected the field hand or had another sweetheart. Sometimes it sounds exactly like dishes are being washed. One night 10 of us were all in the dining room having our regular board meeting on Carnton society. The lady sitting beside me turned to me and said, "I think I hear someone in the kitchen." I just answered, "No." She turned to me again a few minutes later and said, "I know someone is in there," and this time I said there was no one in the kitchen. But she got up and went back there. When she returned and sat down, she had the strangest expression on her face. "You're right," she said. "No one is there." I told the other members of the board about hearing the cook and her antics, and they believed me. Even many visitors who come here ask me if we have spirits in the house. It amazes me that strangers seem to feel it, although when there are lots of workmen around, we don't hear the spirits as much. A workman told me he saw a beautiful girl with dark hair in the upstairs hall. His eyes were huge and his face was white. He won't work up there now unless someone is with him. Whether she was one of the 2 surviving Carnton children who had grown into womanhood that he saw or not, I don't know. The Carntons lost 3 children out of 5 in infancy. Yeah, sorry, man, I can't do the old lady voice that long. She's long-winded, dude. That seems shocking to us. But many people didn't even live to middle age 100 or so years ago. Paul had begun to doubt that he would hear any story relating to his own experience, when finally Mrs. Sieberling changed the subject. "I hope you won't think I am silly when I tell you something else that has been reported to us here. Visitors say they have seen a Confederate soldier who walks the perimeter of the property. I don't laugh at them anymore, for there have been times in the late afternoon, especially in fall, when I have heard my own ghost soldier, or should I say, the sound of heavy footsteps. When I hear those striding feet, I hurry to look out, but the back veranda is always empty. This house was used as a hospital after the Battle of Franklin, and the bodies of 4 Confederate generals were placed on that back porch. The most loved general was the Irishman Pat Cleburne, and all the next day men who had survived the battle filed past, paying their last respects to him. It is said that when Cleburne died, the South lost a general second only to Stonewall Jackson. Before he was buried, Mrs. Carrie McGavock, mistress of the plantation, took the general's cap, later presenting it to the State of Tennessee Museum. "What did the cap look like?" Paul asked. "It was round, black cap, with little buttons on each side. I don't know how many. And there were strips of gold braid that came up to the front and ran into a 4-leaf clover. Poor General Cleburne. They say he was a very brave man." So it makes you wonder if this was General Cleburne. I don't know, though. He said somewhere early in the story he thought he knew the actual rank of the officer. So it might not be the same one. I can't recall. You'd have to rewind it. Let's see. People who have lived here and others in the area have reported hearing a Confederate soldier pace to and fro on the front porch. They came back and asked if I have heard him. I tell them, yes, I have heard him many times. Struck by the similarity of the cap on the officer he had seen and the one belonging to the general. Levitt had heard what he had come to find out. He believed that the stranger he had seen the evening before was none other than the spirit of General Pat Claiborne. But how could he tell Miss Sieberling such a story? He simply let her talk on. I warn you, this house has a pool about it, and if you ever visit it, you'll come back, said Bernice Sieberling. People return again and again. Return again and again echoed in Paul's mind. It may be that spirits do too, he thought. Carnton is a timeless place. It is a place where the dead once stood so close they could not fall, where bullets came thick as rain, and where soldiers pulled their caps down over their faces in a desperate, futile attempt to protect themselves. It is a place to shudder at man's ferocity toward other men. It is probably Tennessee's most haunted house. Yeah, I actually used to live on Perryville Battlefield, the road, right down the road from the actual battlefield spot. And the house I lived in, not when I lived there. I had a couple ghost experiences while I lived there, small ones, but the person who lived in the house before said it was haunted as fuck, you know. I mean, I'm sure I could get tons of stories out of him about it, because I still know him and stuff. I won't say his name, but yeah, I mean, you get a mass amount of people dying in one certain area, I'm not surprised if it gets haunted. But like I said, Nancy Roberts, she always tells where you can find it. So let's see. She's got a little thing here at the bottom. Carnton Plantation is in Franklin, Tennessee, not far from Nashville. The house is open 7 days a week, except in January, February, and March, when it is open Monday through Friday. Its 22 rooms contain much of the original furnishings, which are from the period 1820 to 1860. All the woodwork is wood grain to resemble mahogany or rosewood. The house was decorated not long after the excavation of Pompeii, when mustard yellow, soldier blue, and Pompeii red were in vogue. So not far from Franklin, Tennessee, not far from Nashville. Sounds like it's open. It doesn't have an actual address, but I mean, we have Google, so you can find it. But let me know what you guys think. Do you guys believe it, or does it sound too wild to believe? Let me do a little commercial to let you guys know where you guys can find us. If you're listening, if you're listening audio only, you can find us on YouTube. Our YouTube name is Abe Williams. The profile picture is a dream catcher. But if you're on YouTube and you would like to listen to, the podcast on another format, we do get a penny for each listen. So, hey, maybe one day it'll add up and you can buy me a cheeseburger and not even know it. But you can find us on Breaker, Google Podcast, Radio Public, Spotify, Anchor, and we are also going cross-platform due to YouTube censorship, so we are on BitChute now. Alright, we haven't done this for a little bit. We got a little extra time today, so the saint of today, December 15th. I have a little segment that I started a couple episodes back. I take a saint each day from this book, 365 Saints. It's written by Wooddean Koenig Bricker. And the saint of today, December 15th, is St. Mary de Rosa. St. Mary de Rosa was endowed with more than her fair share of common sense. While many saints seem to have had their heads so far in the heavens they tripped over their own feet, St. Mary de Rosa was eminently practical. When the abandoned girls she was working with didn't have a place to sleep at night, she found them one. When nurses were needed on the battlefields, she sent her sisters out with bandages. When a horse bolted and threatened to overturn its carriage, St. Mary rescued the occupants. When St. Mary saw something to be done, she did it. All too often, when we face problems, our first reaction is to sit back and study the situation. If you've ever served on a committee, you know that that's what committees inevitably do. While the committee is thinking about the overall problem, smaller subcommittees are often formed. The upshot, of course, is nothing ever gets done. While it isn't a good idea to race off half-cocked, neither does it do any good to sit around and wait for someone else to come up with the answer. Often the solution is obvious, when we just have to implement it. If St. Mary had waited for a committee to decide what to do about the need for nurses on the battlefield, hundreds would have died. Instead, she saw what had to be done and did it. Such is the virtue of common sense. And here's a little quote to help you hopefully with your day. When I see something to be done, do I roll up my sleeves and do it? I use my common sense. She lived from 1813 to 1855. But I actually didn't plan that, man. Like, I've had so many synchronicities the past couple days. It's been crazy. I don't know, the whole her, you know, helping people on the battlefield, sending other sisters to be nurses on the battlefield. Just, I don't know. It could be coincidence. It could not be. I like to think of it as synchronicity. I don't really. The older I've gotten, the less I've started to believe in coincidences, and I've started to believe more in synchronicities. But it's a shorter episode for you all. I hope you all enjoyed. You all have a good day.